Emma's wedding dress hung in tatters as she stumbled through the moonlit prairie, her husband's angry shouts echoing behind her. The silk fabric that had seemed so beautiful in the mail-order catalog now caught on every thorn bush, slowing her desperate escape. Her bare feet bled through torn stockings, but the pain felt distant compared to the terror driving her forward. Just 12 hours ago, she had stepped off the train in Kansas, believing she was walking toward a new life as Mrs. William Morrison. The photograph he had sent showed a kind-faced farmer, and his letters promised gentle companionship on his prosperous homestead. Instead, she had found herself trapped with a man whose rage exploded the moment they were alone. The bruises on her arms throbbed with each stumbling step. When he had grabbed her after the brief ceremony, his fingers digging into her flesh with casual cruelty, she knew she would not survive a lifetime of such treatment. The moment he passed out drunk in his chair, she had gathered only her courage and fled into the night. Behind her, his voice grew fainter, but Emma did not slow down. The vast prairie stretched endlessly in all directions, dotted with shadows that could hide her or conceal new dangers. She had no food, no water, no destination except away. The moon painted the grassland in silver light, beautiful and terrifying in its emptiness. Her legs began to shake, exhaustion overtaking adrenaline. She had been traveling for what felt like hours, though time moved strangely in her panic. Each rustle in the grass made her heart race, imagining Morrison's heavy footsteps or wild animals stalking her scent. A coyote howled in the distance, its lonely cry echoing across the plains. Emma wrapped her arms around herself, shivering as the night air cut through her ruined dress. She had escaped one nightmare only to find herself in another kind of danger. But even death on this empty prairie seemed preferable to returning to that house of violence. Her foot caught in a prairie dog hole, and she tumbled forward, scraping her palms on the rough ground. Tears finally came, hot and bitter. She had traveled so far from her sister's farm in Ohio, spending her last savings on train fare to meet a stranger who promised safety. Now she was more alone than ever, lost under an endless sky. Emma struggled to her feet, swaying with fatigue. Her vision blurred, whether from tears or exhaustion she could not tell. The horizon wavered like water, offering no landmark or hope of shelter. She took another step and stumbled again, this time unable to rise. The grass felt surprisingly soft against her cheek as consciousness slipped away. Her last thought was a prayer that Morrison would not find her before the elements claimed her. At least then she would die free. Dawn painted the sky pink and gold when the Lakota hunting party found her. Emma lay motionless in a small hollow, her torn dress bright against the autumn grass. The warriors approached cautiously, unsure whether she was alive or dead. Chief Akacheta dismounted first, kneeling beside the unconscious woman. Her breathing was shallow but steady, her face pale with exhaustion and exposure. Dried tears had left tracks through the dust on her cheeks, and her hands were scraped raw. He studied her torn wedding dress and the bruises visible on her arms, understanding immediately what story the evidence told. Without a word, he lifted her gently onto his horse, wrapping his buffalo robe around her trembling form. Whatever had driven this woman to flee into the wilderness alone, she would find sanctuary in his village. Emma woke to the scent of sage and the sound of a language she'd never heard. Panic flooded her chest as memory returned, and she sat up quickly, immediately regretting the sudden movement. Her head swam, and gentle hands steadied her shoulders. "Easy, you're safe." A deep voice spoke in accented English. Emma's eyes focused on the man before her, taking in his long black hair, traditional clothing, and kind dark eyes. She was inside some kind of dwelling made of hide and wooden poles, warm furs surrounding her like a nest. "Please don't hurt me," she whispered, instinctively shrinking back. The words came automatically after months of fear. The man immediately moved backward, giving her space. "I am Akacheta, chief of this band. You were found on the prairie nearly dead. We brought you here to heal." His voice remained calm and steady despite her obvious terror. Emma pulled the soft buffalo robe closer around herself, realizing someone had cleaned her wounds and wrapped her feet in soft leather. Her torn wedding dress had been replaced with a simple but warm tunic and leggings. "My clothes. The women tended to you," Akacheta explained, seeming to understand her concern. "You have been unconscious for 2 days. We were not certain you would wake." 2 days? Emma looked around the lodge, noting the carefully banked fire, the neat arrangement of belongings, the dried herbs hanging from the poles. Everything spoke of order and care, so different from the chaos she had fled. "You were suffering from exposure and exhaustion," Akacheta continued. "Also fear, I think. The bruises on your arms tell a story." Emma's hand went instinctively to her upper arm where Morrison's fingers had left dark marks. This stranger saw too much, understood too much, but there was no cruelty in his observation, only a gentle sadness. "I won't go back," she said suddenly, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. "Whatever you want in return for helping me, I'll try to give it, but I won't go back to him." Akacheta tilted his head, studying her with those perceptive dark eyes. "You are not a captive here. When you are strong enough, you may go wherever you choose. But winter comes soon, and you are welcome to stay until spring." The simple offer was so unexpected that Emma felt tears threaten again. No demands, no conditions, no price to pay for shelter. She had forgotten that such kindness existed in the world. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you help a stranger?" "Because you needed help," Akacheta replied, as if the answer were obvious. "Rest now. Tomorrow, if you feel stronger, I will show you the village." As evening fell, Emma watched him prepare to sleep by the fire while she occupied the comfortable bed he had clearly given up for her sake. He moved with quiet efficiency, checking the fire, setting aside his weapons, spreading his own blankets on the hard ground. "You don't have to sleep there," she said quietly. "This is your lodge, isn't it?" Akacheta looked up from arranging his blankets. "You need to feel safe. Trust is earned, not demanded." He settled down by the fire, positioning himself between her and the entrance. "Sleep, Emma. You are protected here." For the first time in months, she believed it. When Emma flinched at the sound of approaching horses, Akacheta stepped protectively between her and the lodge entrance. Through the hide walls, she could hear unfamiliar voices speaking in sharp, angry tones. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she recognized one of them. "That's him," she whispered, gripping the buffalo robe so tightly her knuckles went white. "Morrison. He's found me." Akacheta's expression hardened, but his voice remained calm. "Stay here. Do not show yourself unless I call for you." He ducked through the lodge entrance, and Emma pressed herself against the back wall, trembling. Outside, Morrison's voice carried clearly in the crisp air. "I know you savages have her. That's my legal wife you're harboring, and I want her returned immediately." "This is Sheriff Collins," another voice added with authority. The lady belongs to her husband according to territorial law. We're here to escort her home peacefully." Emma bit back a sob. Legal wife. The words felt like chains around her throat. The brief ceremony that had bound her to a monster now threatened to drag her back to hell. Akacheta's response was measured but firm. "The woman came to us injured and afraid. She seeks sanctuary, which we have granted. She will not be forced to leave." "Now, see here," the sheriff blustered. "You can't just kidnap a white woman. We kidnapped no one. She fled to us for protection. Look at her arms when you see her, then tell me who the criminal is." Emma crept closer to the entrance, needing to hear every word that would determine her fate. Through a gap in the hide covering, she could see Morrison red-faced and sweating, his hands clenched into fists. The sight of those hands made her stomach turn. "She's my property," Morrison spat. "I paid good money to bring her here, and she'll honor her obligations whether she likes it or not. These savages have no right to interfere with civilized law." "Property." Akacheta repeated the word with quiet disgust. "A woman is not property. She chooses her own path." The sheriff shifted uncomfortably. "Look, Chief, I understand your perspective, but the law is the law. Marriage is a legal contract. A contract signed under false promises and enforced through violence is no contract at all," Akacheta replied. "She will speak for herself when she is ready. Until then, she remains under our protection." Emma heard footsteps approaching the lodge and shrank back, but Akacheta's voice stopped them. "Any man who enters my lodge without permission will find himself answering to my warriors." "This isn't over," Morrison snarled. "I'll be back with more men. You can't hide behind your heathen customs forever." "Perhaps," Akacheta acknowledged, "but I can protect one frightened woman for as long as she needs protection." After the hoofbeats faded, Akacheta returned to the lodge. Emma was huddled in the corner, tears streaming down her face. Without a word, he knelt several feet away, respecting her space even in her distress. "They'll come back," she whispered. "With soldiers, maybe. You can't fight the territorial government for someone like me." "Someone like you?" Akacheta's tone was genuinely puzzled. "You mean someone brave enough to risk death rather than submit to cruelty? Someone worth protecting?" Emma looked up at him through her tears, seeing only sincerity in his face. "I'm nobody special. Just another foolish woman who made a terrible mistake. You are a woman who chose freedom over safety, courage over comfort. That makes you very special indeed." Akacheta settled back on his heels. "And I have not survived 30 winters by backing down from fights that matter." For the first time in months, Emma smiled watching Akacheta teach children to track animals in the dirt. His large hands moved with surprising gentleness as he showed a little girl how to read the signs of a rabbit's passage through the grass. When she got it right, his face lit up with genuine pride. "See how the back paws land in front?" he was saying in English, translating for Emma's benefit. "Rabbit always does this when moving fast." Emma sat nearby, her hands busy with the beadwork the tribal women had taught her. 3 weeks had passed since Morrison's visit, and each day had brought new understanding of the man who had defied law and custom to shelter her. She had never seen him raise his voice, let alone his hand. Even when frustrated warriors brought him problems, he listened with patience that astounded her. "You would make a good teacher," she told him when the children scattered to practice their new skills. Akacheta settled beside her, careful to maintain the respectful distance he had observed since her arrival. Children are honest. They do not pretend to understand when they are confused, or hide their feelings when they are hurt. Unlike adults, Emma thought, remembering how she had hidden her terror behind smiles during those early days of marriage. They trust you completely. Trust must be earned every day, Akacheta replied, watching the children with fond eyes. Today's kindness does not excuse tomorrow's cruelty. The simple wisdom in his words made Emma's chest tight with emotion. Morrison had demanded trust as his right, growing more violent when she failed to provide it freely. This man understood that trust was a gift, carefully given and easily broken. Akacheta, she said quietly, testing his name on her tongue. What does it mean? Warrior, he replied with a slight smile, though my grandmother said it also means protector of the helpless. She claimed to know which meaning my parents intended. Emma set down her beadwork, moved by the gentle humor in his voice. She sounds wise. She was. She taught me that true strength lies in knowing when not to use your power. His eyes met hers briefly before looking away. A lesson I'd try to remember. As if summoned by their conversation, an elderly woman approached with sure steps despite her obvious age. Her face was deeply lined, but her eyes were sharp with intelligence. She spoke rapidly in Lakota, gesturing toward Emma with what seemed like approval. "What is she saying?" Emma asked. Akacheta looked slightly uncomfortable. "Grandmother Rising Moon says you have good hands for beadwork and a gentle way with the children. She approves of you." Emma sensed there was more to the translation, but didn't press. The old woman smiled at her and patted Akacheta's shoulder before walking away, leaving behind a sense of warm approval. "She helped raise me after my parents died," Akacheta explained. "Her opinion carries weight in the village." "And what is her opinion?" Emma asked softly. Akacheta was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. "She says some gifts come disguised as burdens, that sometimes what seems like misfortune brings exactly what we needed." Emma's heart skipped at the implication in his words. Over the weeks, she had found herself watching for his return from hunting, listening for his voice among the others, feeling safest when he was near. The feelings terrified her as much as they comforted her. "Akacheta," she whispered, then stopped, unsure how to voice what was growing in her heart. He looked at her then, and she saw her own careful longing reflected in his dark eyes. But instead of moving closer, he stood slowly. "The evening meal is ready," he said gently, "and you are still healing. Some conversations are best saved for when the heart is sure of its voice." As he walked away, Emma touched her fingers to her lips, amazed to realize that for the first time since her arrival, she'd wanted someone to stay close rather than keep their distance. Emma's heart pounded, not from fear, but from the intensity in Akacheta's eyes as he asked if she would stay forever. They sat by the river where she had come to wash clothes, the autumn sunset painting the water gold and red. She had been living in his village for 2 months now, and each day had brought deeper healing and understanding. "I know it is much to ask," he continued when she remained silent. "You have been hurt badly, and trust does not come easily, but I must speak what is in my heart before winter traps us in silence." Emma's hands stilled on the wet fabric she had been scrubbing. All around them, the prairie grass swayed in the evening breeze, peaceful and eternal. This place had become home in ways she had never expected, and the man before her had become the center of her world. You want me to stay?" she repeated quietly, needing to hear the words again. "I want you to be my wife," Akacheta said, his voice steady despite the vulnerability in his eyes. Not from obligation or convenience, but from choice. From love freely given. The word wife had once filled her with dread, conjuring images of Morrison's cruel hands and violent temper. But hearing it from Akacheta's lips made her heart flutter with hope instead of fear. This would be different. She would be choosing, not trapped. "I was married before," she whispered, though they both knew the truth of her past. The ceremony was legal, even if the man was a monster. "In my people's eyes, a union built on lies and enforced through violence is no true marriage," Akacheta replied. "You were never truly his wife. Your heart remained your own." Emma looked down at the wedding ring Morrison had forced onto her finger, a symbol of ownership rather than love. She had been unable to remove it during her escape, but now she twisted it free and held it up to the dying light. "I want to throw this away," she said suddenly. "Will you help me?" Without hesitation, Akacheta took the ring and hurled it far into the swift-flowing river. It disappeared with barely a splash, carrying away the last symbol of her captivity. Emma felt a weight lift from her shoulders that she had not even realized she was carrying. "Now I am free to choose," she said, turning to face him fully. "And I choose you, Akacheta. I choose this life, this place, this love we have built together." The smile that spread across his face was like sunrise after a long night. "You are certain? There will be challenges. Some of my people still question my decision to protect you, and the white authorities have not forgotten about you." "Let them question," Emma said with newfound strength. "I know who I am now, and I know who you are. We will face whatever comes together." Akacheta reached for her hands, and she did not flinch when he took them gently in his own. "Then we will be married in the Lakota way, under the eyes of the spirits and the blessing of the people. Will you accept our customs?" "I want to learn everything," Emma replied. "I want to belong here completely." As stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Akacheta explained the marriage ceremony they would share. It was beautifully simple, an exchange of gifts, words of commitment spoken before the tribe, and a feast to celebrate their union. No legal contracts, no ownership papers, just two people choosing to walk through life together. "When?" Emma asked, leaning closer to his warmth. "Tomorrow, if you wish. Grandmother Rising Moon has already begun preparing the feast, convinced you would say yes." Emma laughed, feeling lighter than she had in years. "She saw this before we did, didn't she?" "Grandmothers see many things," Akacheta agreed, raising her hand to his lips for the gentlest of kisses. "But she also said that some souls are meant to find each other, no matter how far they must travel or how much pain they must endure to meet." The next evening, dressed in a beautiful beaded dress gifted by the tribal women, Emma stood before the assembled village and pledged her life to the man who had saved more than her body. He had saved her spirit. As they shared the traditional meal from one bowl and Akacheta wrapped them both in his wedding robe, Emma knew she had finally found her true home. Under the star-filled prairie sky, surrounded by people who had welcomed her as family, she was no longer the terrified mail-order bride who had fled into the darkness. She was Emma, wife of Akacheta, member of the Lakota people, and mistress of her own destiny at last. A young woman in a torn white wedding dress running across moonlit prairie grassland, her hair flowing behind her, desperation and fear on her face. Realistic photograph style. Cinematic lighting, 1870s American West setting. A Lakota chief in traditional winter clothing, kneeling beside an unconscious woman in torn dress, lying in prairie grass at dawn. His expression showing concern and protectiveness, realistic style, cinematic lighting, 18th century American West. Interior of Native American lodge with soft firelight. A young woman in native dress sitting wrapped in buffalo robe while talking to a Lakota chief who sits respectfully at distance. Warm, amber lighting, realistic photograph style, 1870s setting. Tense confrontation scene outside Lakota village. Angry white men on horseback facing Lakota chief who stands protectively. Prairie backdrop, dramatic afternoon lighting, realistic style, cinematic composition, 18th century American West. Peaceful village scene with Lakota chief teaching children to track in dirt while young woman does beadwork nearby. Golden afternoon light, realistic photograph style, 1870s American West. Warm family atmosphere.